Everyone knows about the green flu outbreak in Left 4 Dead, but what if the solution was right in front of us all along? A nuclear solution, one that would solve our problem, but with devastating consequences. That's what I'll be talking about in today's video. If we hit 1,000 likes, I'll post some baby bunny pictures on my community tab, so make sure you're subscribed and you'll see them pop up on your feed. If you enjoy this theory, let me know if you want more by leaving a like and commenting what you thought about this theory. But without further ado, let's begin. To understand how we get to something called the nuclear theory, we need to define the problem and motivations leading up to that point. Starting at the very beginning, throughout Left 4 Dead, there's an outbreak that gets labeled the green flu. It's the whole reason the infected exists and provides a premise to the game. The Left 4 Dead wiki describes the virus as the green flu, commonly referred to as the infection, is the name given to the unknown virus which caused the current in-universe epidemic. The virus turns the afflicted into a zombie-like being, making them incredibly homicidal. In rare cases, the infected will not turn and instead become carriers. Biologically, the flu seems to be a rabies-like pathogen, and CETA's designation of the virus as a form of influenza appears to be nothing more than a cover-up to avoid mass panic. The origin of the virus is unknown. Many people have pointed out the more nuanced differences between calling them infected versus zombies, but understand for the point of today's video, I might use the words interchangeably. A lot of people assume the world of Left 4 Dead is completely zombified, but the events of both games take place within weeks of the first infection shown by the Left 4 Dead 1 trailer, meaning a large portion of the world isn't even affected by the outbreak. As of right now, the infection resides primarily in the eastern United States. But has the government done anything to stop the infection? We can't just go from first infection to all-out nukes, right? And you'd be correct. Initially, CETA attempted to handle the outbreak. Well, who or what is CETA? CETA, which stands for Civil Emergency and Defense Agency, is a fictional US government organization in the Left 4 Dead universe and is based on the real-life Federal Emergency Agency (FEMA) and the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Since 1988, the Civil Emergency and Defense Agency has protected millions of Americans from terrifying unforeseen consequences of natural and man-made disasters and is responsible for responding to disasters and assisting in the recovery. The most recent disaster they're assisting in is the green flu epidemic, which has appeared to overwhelm them, as no non-infected officials from the organization can be found. Only abandoned evacuation centers, advertisements, and supplies, and some infected CETA operatives can be seen throughout the series. To summarize, CETA should be the US's first and only needed defense when it comes to outbreaks, but by playing the games we know whatever their plans or solutions were didn't quite work out. The wiki pointed it out, but as you play through the games, countless empty evacuation centers can be found within the levels. A really good example are the ones in the Dead Center and Parishes campaign. Speaking of the Parish, the campaign reveals a lot of information not seen at first glance. As the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors make their way through the campaigns, the last campaign they come across is the Parish. So by analyzing the Parish, it's going to give us the most recent and up-to-date strategies the US is deploying. I mentioned it earlier, but we can find an abandoned CETA evacuation center towards the end of the second map, so we know that at this point in the story, CETA was still attempting to evacuate citizens. For the Left 4 Dead lore aficionados, you already know this isn't the only tactic the government started using. In the Parish's campaign, the military plays a very important role. Throughout the campaign, jets fly overhead and begin bombing the city in an attempt to thin the number of infected. So already some of our survivors don't trust them, primarily Nick pointing out later that they might just line us up against a wall and shoot us. Dead bodies can be found inside the Parish's campaign just like any other, however these ones are different. Piled outside the CETA evacuation site lay a ton of bodies, not infected but normal people. You see, due to the dangerous nature of the green flu, the military weren't taking any chances. At the mere sign of a cough or pale skin, you would be executed. At the end of the map, the survivors enter a safe room full of dead bodies, which they even point out weren't infected. Martha and I, along with another group of people, were held back from the others. We were escorted by military personnel wearing gas masks, which I had only seen a few of them wearing. Most of the troopers stayed far away from us citizens, but didn't feel the need to wear such masks. For some reason, every guard that walked with us was equipped with one. I could tell something wasn't right. We made it through the evacuation and screening. We should be completely fine. Has something happened? We came to a room with a big red door that had a single barred window. The guards shouted at us to line up against the wall wall for further inspection. Martha grabbed my hand and told me everything was gonna be alright. The sounds of gunfire rang inside the room as people beside me began to fall to the ground. Instinctively, I fell with them. For what seemed like hours, I held onto Martha's cold hands as other dead survivors laid on top of me. The guards came close to where we laid and shot a few more times before exiting the room. As the survivors continue through the next map, they come across an out-of-place helicopter that seems to have been taken down by other survivors, or at the very least, people. And when you make it to the final map in the parish, the military asks some very interesting questions, asking if they're immune and then questioning if the chopper is prepped for carriers. The reason I'm describing these events to you is to emphasize how quickly the US government escalated their countermeasures. With only a few weeks, we went from CETA, a disease center which was meant to assist and evacuate people, to bombing raids and outright executions. It is not unreasonable to believe that with enough pressure, the United States government could and would launch nukes on its own nation in an effort to quickly eliminate the threat, potentially leading to the most dangerous nuclear winter in all of history. This is what I call the nuclear theory.
Nuclear missile ready.
The games take place in the year 2009, roughly the same time they were released. Did the US have nuclear capabilities at this time? If so, where would the nukes be launched from, and where exactly would they be targeting? According to Google and sources I double-checked, yes, the US possessed nuclear weapons in 2009. In fact, in 2009, the US maintained a nuclear stockpile of approximately 5,000 warheads. Here's a more detailed breakdown. Strategic nuclear weapons. The US had approximately 5,113 deployed warheads in 2009. Non-strategic weapons. The US also maintained a stockpile of non-strategic nuclear weapons estimated to be around 500 operational and another 600 in inactive storage. With those amount of warheads, the United States could easily wipe out their whole country, but there would be no need for that. Let's suspend our disbelief here. Through my knowledge and research, the Tsar Bomba was the biggest bomb ever tested. It was created by the Soviet Union and the US never owned one of these bombs. But let's give the government the benefit of the doubt and say the US owned a few of these nukes or nukes with similar destructive capabilities. The government could decide to drop a small amount of these super powerful nukes targeting high density areas, but where specifically? To find that out, we need to look at the first game, and according to the wiki, the entire setting for the No Mercy campaign takes place in the city of Fairfield, a fairly large northeast American city with a skyline featuring predominantly pre-1950s urban architecture suggestive of a local economy that has struggled in recent decades. The city has a multi-story modern hospital which is operating although undergoing renovation, a large subway network, and an extensive sewer system. The city has been overrun by the infected, although safe rooms can be found within 5 or 10 minutes easy walk from one another, if one knows where to look. If we consider Fairfield, Pennsylvania as the location of the initial outbreak, this city would definitely be a target. Now let's take a look at the second game. The second game takes place in Savannah, Georgia, at least during the Dead Center campaign. But as we explore the surrounding areas in Left 4 Dead, we find out that the whole area is pretty much overrun, from high-density city areas to the middle-of-nowhere swamps. I mentioned earlier that the infection is contained to the eastern United States, and you can prove that by looking at in-game maps. Each one of these X's represents a fallen city and thus a nuclear target. By just counting the number of X's on this map, it reveals a total of 19-ish cities. That's 19 Tsar Bomba-sized nukes. I went to this nuclear website and tried roughly mapping out where all of those targets would be, and let's just say it's one of the scariest images I think I'll ever see. These nukes could be assisted by smaller warheads targeting gaps like in Georgia and Tennessee. But this raises another important question. Where could these nukes be launched from? The United States had nuclear submarines in 2009, so the best bet would be launching them from the Atlantic Ocean. I could see a possibility where the nukes were launched from facilities in the west, but launching them from the Atlantic would mean that they'd hit their targets much faster. Planes could also drop the bombs if need be, but I'm sure people in the comments will tell me which is the most optimal. My grandmother and I used to watch our television closely. The new infection in the East was on every channel, you couldn't escape it. She used to tell me stories of a sunrise that would bring an end to all the chaos, that one day we would awake to a brighter world. I remember it like it was yesterday. I met my grandmother on our porch where she drinks her morning tea. As we watched the sunrise, we noticed a second glow, almost as if the sun had risen again. But before we knew it, there were 20 suns that lit up the horizon, with a warmth that could pierce your soul. Let's talk about the destructive capabilities of a single bomb. Inside the smallest radius marks instant death. It's the initial fireball that comes right after impact. Anything inside this zone is immediately vaporized. The second, gray radius, represents major destruction. Buildings are leveled and fires ignite everywhere. Death is almost certain. The third, orange radius, represents thermal radiation. 100% probability of third-degree burns you'll never even feel, as the burns stretch through multiple layers of your skin and destroy your nerves. The final light gray radius represents minor damage, shattered windows and injuries to those within proximity to said windows. Unstable small structures could collapse, but if you take cover you'll be relatively safe. According to Google, a nuclear winter is a hypothetical long-term climactic event resulting from a major nuclear exchange. It's characterized by a significant drop in global temperature due to the injection of large amount of smoke and ash into the stratosphere, blocking sunlight and reducing photosynthesis. This would lead to widespread crop failure, famine, and potential societal collapse. Anything east of the Mississippi River is a dead zone, a wasteland no one will enter for a very long time. The US government would immediately begin construction of some type of barrier that blocks the east, in an attempt to cage any remaining survivors or infected, if they somehow survive the initial blast and the radiation that comes afterwards. Nuclear winter could fall upon the planet as a result of these bombings, but how bad would this winter be? Well, it depends on the number of bombs dropped. If they dropped extra bombs, the winter could be much worse. Significant lower global temperature could affect ecosystems and make it harder for daily life. While crops become much harder to cultivate, widespread famine is imminent. But to the US government, this is a much greater outcome than letting the entire world fall to the green flu. In this Left 4 Dead universe, we assume the nukes did what they were supposed to and wiped out every single individual in the infection zone, eradicating the green flu entirely. However, realistically, a single infected escaping unnoticed on a plane or some mode of transport could spell the end of humanity. In this scenario, the nukes would merely give humanity more time to try and develop a cure, assuming their labs weren't located in the dead zone. But due to the nature of the green flu, in the Sacrifice comic, they explain how hard it is to develop a cure. The virus defies anything we've ever seen. Sometimes it's airborne, sometimes it's not. It mutates daily. We're trying to cure it and we can't even pin it down. This theory also has another major problem. What about carriers? Well, for those of you who don't know, here's the wiki definition. A carrier, short for asymptomatic carrier, is a person exposed to the infection who appears to be asymptomatic due to a natural resistance to the symptoms but lack an immune response to degrade the disease. Without degradation, the person carries the disease in their body and can unintentionally transmit the disease to others. This renders carriers a threat to public safety. The carriers are on a similar boat as the infected. If even one of them are able to transmit the infection beyond the dead zone, it could be the end for everyone. If somehow, some way, a cure was able to be administered, the carriers would be able to freely reintegrate into society. However, I don't think that even in the best case, the military would allow survivors back in. Too much damage has already been done. Carriers would still most likely be executed. Even if carriers were able to reintegrate into society, a lot of people would still hate them. By reading signs on the nearby safe rooms, a lot of the other survivors have huge problems with carriers. A lot of the non-carrier survivors view the carriers as basically infected. I could see people also holding on to grudges for those carriers that did kill their family members, and then those people want to kill all the carriers. So by avoiding all that drama, the military could just easily kill them all. In the ideal world, nuking the East could stop the infection, and keeping any survivors away from the rest of humanity would be a must. How the US would begin repairing the dead zone or adventuring into it remains to be seen. Decades after the bomb drop, I could see a black market opening up where people venture into the dead zone to extract expensive materials. It'd be a very interesting premise for a spin-off or a third game. I want you to walk away from this video with a few questions. Would you be able to burn the world? Could you sacrifice millions to save billions? Would you push that button? What if you were the person in charge of pressing that nuclear button in DC, knowing you, along with everybody else in the East, would die? Could you do that? For me, I like to believe I could. I'd sacrifice myself for a sunrise I know I'll never see, but that's easy to say. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about this theory. Once again, if we hit 1,000 likes, I'll post some baby bunny pictures on my community tab, so consider leaving a like. I haven't done a theory video in about 3 months, so I wanted to come back swinging. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a nice rest of your day. Peace out.